Welcome to my podcast, The Road to Victory. I am your host, and today we are joined by a renowned expert in the field of psychology and technology, Dr. Larry Rosen, with over 35 years of research experience and 7 books under his belt. Dr. Rosen is a leading authority on the impact of technology in our lives. His groundbreaking work has expanded across 23 countries, examining the effects of technology in over 80,000 individuals. His most recent book, The Distracting Mind, Asian Brain in a High-Tech World, co-authored with Adam Gassel, offers a fascinating look why we are all easily distracted in today's digital age. In this episode, Dr. Rosen will share valuable insights and practical strategies to help us avoid the pitfalls of technology dependence, stay focused, and reclaim our lives. If you are tired of feeling controlled by your screens and want to take back control, this episode is for you. So let's get started. Welcome, Dr. Rosen, to my podcast, The Road to Victory. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
60% of people have their phone on them all the time. 80% of smartphone users check their phone within 15 minutes of waking up. 70% of people admit to using their phones during work meetings. 67% of people check their phone while talking to friends and family members. Is our phone really connecting us, Dr. Rosen?
That's a very good question. There's a difference between connecting and communicating, I think. And yes, it is connecting us, but I don't think it's connecting us in a particularly great way. We would like to be connected in a way that we're actually communicating like we are talking now. But oftentimes people are using their phone in places where they're really not communicating with the people who are right there at the same time. And then the other problem is that we have fallen into a trap of, as I sometimes say, because it's there, we can look at it. And so our phones seem to hold this allure and almost such that we can't let go. And so we check it as soon as we wake up, which, by the way, there's some interesting research that shows that if we check it by just when we wake up, what happens is the cortisol levels in our brain get juiced up and cause anxiety problems. But we'll get into a lot of that as we go through some of the issues. But it is the case that we can't seem to let it go. It's
Okay.
just omnipresent. You ever feel your pocket vibrate and you think
Yeah.
your phone's there, but it's not really your phone? Well, that's
No.
10 years ago, if your pocket had vibrated, you would have just reached your fingers down there and scratched that itch. Now, instead of an itch, we think it's a phone.
We think it's an important call or something. We are waiting for something to happen, right?
Yes, always. And the interesting thing is on our phone, because we have put ourselves out there, most of us, in social media, and not just one social media site, but 3, 4, 5. There's always something when we open our phone that intrigues us. And then that leads to something else and to something else. And so we kind of fall down that rabbit hole of
Okay.
of looking until I don't know until when. Sometimes
Okay.
forever.
Well, findings suggest that repeated interruptions can lead to a significant decline in IQ, given that we face an average of 60 interruptions per day. For example, when a student keeps getting distracted by constant phone notifications, so they delay in studying for a test. Similarly, this can happen when someone gets caught up in posting in social media, so they forget to do the work that they should be doing. Are these persistent distractions eroding our intellectual capabilities and leading to a gradual decline in our intelligence?
I don't know if it's leading to a decline in our intelligence, but if we're doing a task and we get distracted, the research shows that it'll take us about 20 minutes to get back to that task. And so if you keep imagine yourself as a teenager and you're studying biology or something, and you're reading the biology chapter, and ding, your phone dings, and so you look at it, you get a text or a notification, and you tapping you and you go back and forth. And then 20 minutes later, you come back. What do you remember of what you've already read? Very little. So you have to go back, sometimes all the way back to the beginning in order to refresh the memory part in your brain. And so what's going to happen is it's going to take you longer to do that task. But also because we have limited time and we only have minus sleep 24 hours a day, minus sleep, we have 16 hours a day maybe to do our tasks, that's going to make us more stressed. And that's what people are finding is that this constant crazy interruption. So interruption, distraction, interruption, distraction makes us very stressed and releases chemicals in our brain that make us stressed because we feel like, oh my goodness, it's 10 o'clock at night and I've got to go to school tomorrow and yet I haven't finished reading the biology chapter for first period. And so it's a continual kind of cycle that goes through that stresses us out all the time. We're good multitaskers, but we're really not. We're not very good multitaskers. And even when we know we should be focusing on one thing, we can't do it. There's just because we are so easily interrupted by our devices that we simply can't do it. It just doesn't work for us. We can't multitask. We can't do all sorts of things at the same time and learn the same amount or get the same amount. Which, by the way, is interesting because if this is obviously I've been using an example of a student studying biology, but this is all of us. I mean, if you're driving your car and you come to a stoplight behind another car and the light changes to green and the car doesn't go, what's happening? Well, the person is probably looking at their phone with, maybe a 30-second red light. They thought, well, get it, cram in as much, check this message, check this message, check this, check this. And so it's just this constant craziness that happens.
Can you explain the concept of dopamine loops and how they relate to social media addiction?
Dopamine's an interesting chemical. Dopamine is a chemical that we typically think of as a pleasure chemical, although it has a lot of other uses in the brain and the body. But what happens is you do an activity, and if that's a pleasurable activity, you feel good. The reason you feel good is likely the cause of the dopamine being molecules being poured into your brain, and the dopamine molecules then give us this feeling of pleasure. And so then we do it again, but we don't feel as much pleasure the second time because we have to do it more to get the same pleasure. So it's this continual loop of we got to do it, we get pleasure, we got to do it more, we get more pleasure, more and more and more. And it's what drives people, for example, to play video games for a long time. I don't play video games anymore, but I mean, I do know lots of people, and what they say is that playing a little bit is fine the first time, but then the next time you have to play more and more and more and more, and all of a sudden it's 2 a.m. and you're still playing the same video game.
Wow. Is our sleep affected by smartphones?
I'm sorry, I missed that one. I was drinking
Is
coffee.
our sleep affected by smartphones?
Oh, is our sleep affected? So I don't know if it was in one of the statistics that you said at the beginning, but most people sleep with their smartphones close at hand, and most people leave either the ringer on or the vibration on or something. And when you look at kids, 3/4 of the kids sleep with it on and close at hand, often under their pillow or next to their bed. What that does is, excuse me, sleep is a process. And the process is the same process that our brains have done for millennia. When we go to sleep, we try to go to sleep, we put our brain into sleep phases. and there are typically four phases. You kind of get a little bit of sleep, a little bit more of this, a little bit more, and then the fourth one you dream. And
Okay.
then what happens is in the early evening you dream a little bit, a couple minutes, and then you go back through the four phases of deeper and deeper and deeper sleep, and then you dream again, and you go through about, most people, if they're good sleepers, go through about four phases of sleep, and the last dream is really long. It's about an hour long. Now the problem is that that's if you're a good sleeper. If you're constantly interrupted by your phone, it disrupts that process, and your brain doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know whether to go back into light sleep or deep sleep. And what happens is your brain then cuts off some of the REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep that shows that you're dreaming. And
Okay.
dreaming is absolutely critical to a good night's sleep. And then biologically, what happens when we sleep is, let me back up a little. During the day, as we're thinking, we have a lot of stuff going on in our brain. And the way we think has to do with molecules in our brain. And when you are learning things or doing things during the day, your brain uses some molecules, but some parts of it doesn't need. So it like cuts them off and throws them into your brain. And they just float around in your brain during the day. If you don't have a good night's sleep, what happens, if you do have a good night's sleep, if you're a good sleeper, what happens is your spinal column opens up and kind of flushes spinal fluid through your brain and washes out those little pieces, those little random pieces away. If you don't get a good night's sleep, or you're constantly checking your phone or waking up or whatever, then what happens is those pieces form together and they form what are called plaques. And plaque is like a hard substance that disrupts the function of your brain. And in fact, when they look at the brains of Alzheimer's patients who have passed away, they find that they have a lot of plaque in their brain. And so what we're doing is kind of, with all these constant nighttime interruptions with our phone, we're kind of working our way into having potentially Alzheimer's or other kinds of learning problems, dementia, levels of dementia as we grow older. And we're already starting to see that.
Very good.
Kind of scary.
Scary. Does technology help us with the boredom and anxiety or provoke it?
This thing we carry in our pocket is a
Yeah.
very strong. It has everything we could ever want. I mean, imagine all the little pieces separately. You'd stuff your pockets in your jacket pockets and everything with your phone and your camera and this and that. I mean, so it does so much that it is omnipresent in our lives. And that is not a good thing,
No.
because brains need other things. We need to go out in nature. We need to talk to people. We can't just simply spend our time with our phone, looking at our phone, and think that we're actually doing something good for our brain and our mind. And so it's just kind of this continual problem. And what's interesting, I mean, we have all the data. That's what's kind of fascinating is we have data. I mean, every week something pops up that says, this week you used your phone X number of minutes a day, and this is 15% higher than yesterday or whatever. So we know what we're doing. I've had students in research subjects go and show us their screen time on their iPhone, which tells you things like, what was the first app that you tapped? How many minutes did you spend on this app and this app and this app? And even when you show somebody that, even when you say, look what you're doing, 12 hours a day, most of the time is spent on social media, blah, 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 we can't stop it. It's as though we have no control. And we do have control. I mean, I can take this little thing and put it down next to me, turn it upside down and not look at it. But if it beeps, I will get a visceral reaction.
Okay.
and I will feel it, and then my brain will go, well, I better go check that. Could be important. And so it's this constant tug of war between the device wanting our attention and our brain either allowing our attention to be changed or our brain saying, no, we can't do it. Right now, I don't think that any of us are very good at saying no. I think we need to learn to say, hold on, not yet. But that's an issue of taking control. And we haven't yet taken control of our device. Our device is really taking control of us.
Unrealistic comparisons, cyberbullying, and the perpetuation of unattainable beauty standards are just a few examples of the unique challenges that social media poses to young people's lives. What are the potential risks and consequences of these factors? And what can young people do to protect themselves from their harmful effects?
Well, there's a lot of research now on the impact of the phone on you, and particularly young people. And most of the studies look at communication because that's the primary thing that young people do on their phone. And when you talk about communication, that means social media, iMessaging, email, whatever, Zoom, whatever we're communicating. The problem is that the research is difficult to do because you
Okay.
can't drill a hole in somebody's head and look at what's going on inside there. But what we do know is that a good amount of research shows that the more time you spend on social media, on communication, on connection, actually the worse your mental health is. And what they find is, I mean, it depends. There's lots of studies, hundreds of studies. And depending upon what they study, they find that you don't communicate well. I mean, there's research showing that young people who have been kind of using their phones for quite a while don't know how to make eye contact, so they're always looking down rather than looking up. And eye contact is very important in communicating.
Very
If
important.
all of a sudden I was talking to you and I just was doing this, it wouldn't be very helpful to you to understand what I was saying because you use, as we do, eyes, eyebrows, facial expressions, all that to understand communication. Um, there is evidence that young people are constantly comparing themselves to what they read on social media. And there's even a theory called social comparison theory that says that
Okay.
we try to compare ourselves, but we know that people mostly post really positive things on social media. And so their lives look much better than our life. So we feel depressed. And there's research showing lots of depression, anxiety. Both of those are incredibly rampant. Anxiety is at an all-time high among teenagers.
Okay.
Something like 31.1% of teenagers will have some sort of an anxiety problem during their teenage years. That's basically a third of all teenagers. That's a lot. There's a lot of things that can make us anxious out there, and particularly spending a lot of time looking at social media, at looking at YouTube videos, and whatever it is you're doing can make us feel less than.
Wow. It's like faking our lives, just posting about the things that we like to do, but rather than living, just faking it, right? Dr.
Exactly.
Rosen, can you discuss your research findings on the impact of social media use on mental health, specifically how excessive social media consumption can lead to psychological disorders such as obsessive compulsive disorders, narcissism, depression, and schizophrenia? Is social media bad for our mental health?
So social media is a broad topic, and there are certainly, sorry, there's a helicopter going by
It's fine.
military base, so we get helicopters near the Marine base. Yeah, social media. Um, first of all, it's not just a concept. There's lots of social medias, and part of what we are finding is that spending too much time doing this, talking not face to face,
Okay.
is just not good for people. It doesn't help them understand other communication. And the bottom line then is it often leads to um, poor internal feelings, which can lead to anxiety, can lead to depression. Um, there's a lot of research that people on social media will often bully other people. And so there's cyberbullying problems, which then also does the same, makes you feel very depressed, very sad, very anxious. Um, our world is very different. I mean, and it's not that necessarily that this is all bad. I mean, certainly we live in a world now where we can do anything. Um, we can take pictures, we can drive a car, we can do anything we want. Just simply having this device with us allows us to do that, and that opens up a lot of possibilities um, for us in this world. But the problem is that it also opens up a lot of potential problems in this world. And so what I always counsel people to try to do is to try to have a balance between what you get in the real world and what you get in the virtual world. And right now, the balance is very much tipped towards the virtual world. A lot of young people spend hours per day, 10, I mean, some of our research shows 10, 12 hours per day on the average, and most of it's spent on social media. And that just simply can't be good. It's just not good for us. And so what we try to do is get this sort of balance between our real life and our screen life. And that's difficult for young people because they really don't have the brain development, particularly this part of the brain in the front, the prefrontal cortex, that then helps them make better decisions. In fact, this doesn't develop until the mid-20s or later. And so we tend to make bad decisions. And that what we don't have to. I mean, nobody's making us make bad decisions, but it is pretty exciting to people that they can connect with anybody they want at any time, or they can go and play a game on their phone when they're bored, or they can read a book. Well, maybe they wouldn't read a book because they wouldn't like that part. They can listen to their favorite music. They can watch the Olympics. I mean, there's an infinite amount of things you can do on the phone that you can do in real life. It's just it's a different access to it. We have 24/7 access to that world. And that's just in the long run causing problems.
What do you mean by the myth of multitasking, and how does our modern world habit of constantly switching between different tasks, apps, and notifications create an illusion of multitasking? As you said it, is task switching, not multitasking.
So let me try to describe multitasking in a different way. Imagine that that your brain itself is full of nerve cells, but it also has blood vessels running all through it. And the purpose of the blood is really important. It carries oxygen and glucose to the various molecules, to the various nerves in your brain, and that allows them to work. So now imagine that you're working on something. I didn't pick a topic. You're a student studying biology again. So you're studying biology, and so the blood kind of flows over, say, to here where the biology information is, which, by the way, is wrong. It's a lie. The biology information is everywhere, but for the sake of the argument, let's assume it's just right here. So now you've got blood rushing there to give glucose and oxygen and get those nerves going and learn that biology. But now all of a sudden your phone beeps, and that beep immediately startles that and says, "Oh, we better move away from here and move that blood flow over here so we can figure out who's beeping us or what's beeping us." So now the biology stuff over here has less blood, less oxygen, less functional work. So now we talk to whoever beeped us, and then we come back here and we have to then start all over again, essentially. We have to take that blood and get those nerves going again. And so if we're constantly doing that, constantly back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, what happens in the long run is that we cannot grasp it all at the same time. Can't get it all at the same time. And what happens is we suffer from multitasking, which seems like should be a good thing, but we actually suffer the negative repercussions of multitasking, which is really, and if you think of not multitasking, most people think multitasking is I can do two things at the same time. I can talk to you and I can think at the same time. I can talk to you and bounce a basketball at the same time. I can talk to you and type something at the same time. That's not really, multitasking is really, that's not what we're talking about. True multitasking is really task switching. It's moving from a task to a task to a task to a task. And the phone, the devices that we own, that we use all the time, force us to switch tasks. And this is a really interesting field because there's been lots of researchers who do this research, and there are basically people can't multitask.
Okay.
And if you one way to show whether you think you're a good multitasker, because some people, there are 2% of the people are what are called super taskers. They can multitask very well, but that's only 2%. Their other 98% can't do that. If you turn on the television and say to one of the like sports shows or news shows, they always have those tickers, this thing at the bottom with the words going by back and forth and back and forth. And then there's somebody always talking. You can't pay attention to both of them at the same time. If you try to read what's coming on the scroll, you won't hear what's coming from the person talking. If you try to listen to the person talking, but try to read at the same time, you just can't do it. And that means you're not getting the full amount of both what the person is saying and what the ticker at the bottom is saying. You're only getting partial information. And with partial information, we tend to make bad decisions. We tend to decide to do things that we probably shouldn't have done. Most of which are distract ourselves and move that oxygen from there to there and there to there all the time. And what that does is it makes us tired. It makes us stressed, makes us anxious. It can make us depressed, just because we keep thinking we can do this, but we really can't. We're just not that good.
That's why I try to do one thing. I read. When I read, I read. When I watch podcast, I watch podcast, and that's all I do. Your
That's
study
good
found that.
because then you're just doing one task, and then you're essentially your whole brain is focusing on that one task, which will help you then transfer the information that comes in from short-term memory into longer-term memory. So you'll remember it the next day or a week later or whatever. Makes total sense.
So your study found that phones can be a significant source of stress, measuring anxiety levels in participants at three intervals, 10, 30, and 15 minutes after they were denied access to the devices. Can you
Oh,
discuss
okay.
the findings of this study, which suggest that separation from our phones can trigger an increase in anxiety and obsessive behaviors?
Got it. Okay. So one of my colleagues, Dr. Nancy Cheever, is very interested in this area. And
Okay.
she has done a couple of studies that I think are very important. And one of them is she brought a whole bunch of people, 100+ people into a room. And some she told to come in one door, some to come in the other door. People that came in this door, they were told to go sit down, put all their work papers underneath their seat and just pay attention. They weren't allowed to talk. They couldn't sit next to anybody. They just had to focus and pay attention. What are they focusing on? Nothing. Nothing was going on. So they just had to sit there. The other people came in the other side and they were told, come put all your books and stuff underneath. But before you do that, give us your phone. And here's a claim ticket for your phone. Give us your phone. She'll hold on to it for you. And what she did is at 10 minutes in, at 30 minutes in, and at almost an hour, at 15 minutes in, she gave them a very short form that measures anxiety. And the results were even fascinating to her. She didn't expect this, that those people who were very, what you would call light users of their phone, they they could leave their phone home and it wouldn't bother them, or could be in another room and it wouldn't bother them. They showed basically no anxiety
Okay.
across the whole time. Those who had kind of a moderate use of their phone, meaning they used it but not a lot. They weren't like users who were using it all the time, but a good amount of time. What they showed is an increase in anxiety from the 10-minute to the 30-minute, but then it leveled off. So they had a moderate amount of anxiety. It was the heavy users, the ones who were always using their phone, that were the most interesting, because even 10 minutes in, they were already more anxious. And that anxiety just kept climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. So after 50 minutes, they were really anxious. And she said, it was funny, when the study finished, she said she could feel the anxiety in the room coming from those people. Did it matter whether you had your phone or whether we had your phone? Didn't matter. Out of sight was out of mind. Nope, out of sight was not out of mind. Out of sight was in mind. The fact that either your phone was underneath your desk or we had it made you very anxious, very, very anxious. So then she did another study, which I think is one of the most interesting studies. She would bring people into the lab and she would put these she would tell them to sit down at a table and put their phone next to them. And then she would put these two little gadgets on their fingers. They're like little clamps that would clamp on. One measured heart rate and one measured what's called galvanic skin response. What galvanic skin response, GSR, is it measures arousal. It measures sweat, technically. I mean, that's kind of what it's measuring, is the sweat in your fingers. And when you get aroused, whether it's a good arousal, positive arousal, or a negative arousal, anxiety, you get a little sweat there. So then what she did is she said, okay, what I want you to do is to watch what's on the screen. I'm going to ask you questions when it's done. And about a minute later, she said, wait, let's stop. Well, hold on, we have to stop. She said, your phone is causing problems with these two little gadgets. I'm just going to take your phone and put it behind you on this table. Is that okay? Sure, put the phone on the table. And then while they were then watching the video, she would text them, but they couldn't get their phone. So they'd hear their phone go, whatever text message sound, bing or zzz or whatever, but they couldn't get it. What happened is every single time that she texted them, that the one that showed arousal, so every time they got a text message that they couldn't answer, they were anxious. When we asked later what they were anxious about, they said, well, they were anxious that they were missing out on something, that somebody was trying to get in touch with them, that they were going to miss out on. And from that comes the concept of FOMO, the fear of missing out. Mm-hmm. We have developed this relationship with our phones where if it beeps and we don't get it, we don't look at it immediately, we feel like we might miss something. And that's a really important concept. And it's interesting because we've done this. She did this with news reporters. One news reporter brought in teenage girls. She did it with a couple of teenage girls, whereas the news reporter went like this and spiked a little. The teenage girls, big spike, got very anxious that they couldn't look at their phone because they get hundreds of text messages a day and they're afraid they're going to miss out on something important. That's really a critical feature, I think, of what's going wrong with our phone, is that we've built up this sort of visceral reaction of anxiety.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy. Thank you so much, Dr. Rosen, to be with us. We're going to do the final speech and we're done. Thank you so much for the time. Excessive abuse of social media was associated with a world subsequent mental health, depression, anxiety, and stress symptoms levels, having disabled pain in upper extremities and unhealthy lifestyle behaviors, poor sleep quality, and physical inactivity, and worse levels of psychological health factors, higher loneliness, and more economic difficulty. One way in which social media contributes to obesity is through promoting a sedentary lifestyle. Many people spend hours every day scrolling through social media feeds, sitting in one place without getting any physical activity. This lack of movement can contribute to weight gain and obesity, as it reduces the number of calories burned through the day. Social media use among students has been found to have a positive and significant relationship with academic procrastination. This means that students who are addicted to social media are more likely to engage in procrastination when it comes to their academic tasks. As we reflect on our discussion today, it's clear that our phones, while incredibly useful, often steal our most valuable resource, time. The average person spends hours each day on their phones, much of it in activities that add little to our lives. This addiction to our screens can prevent us from engaging in deeply with our world around us and with the people who matter the most. Let's challenge ourselves to take a step back and evaluate our own phone habits. What could we achieve if we reclaim even a portion of that time? How much more present could we be in our daily lives? Thank you for joining us today in this episode of The Road to Victory. We are a podcast dedicated to exploring the intersection of mental health and success through in-depth interviews with expert psychologists and inspiring individuals. We aim to raise awareness about the critical role mental health plays in achieving success and overall well-being. Our mission is to normalize conversation around mental wellness and provide valuable resources for those seeking to improve their mental health. If you enjoyed this episode, please listen us and subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, watch our episodes on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook for more content. Remember, mental health matters, and by prioritizing it, we can unlock our full potential for success. Thank you, Larry Rosen, for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. It was fun.